Have you ever caught yourself saying something in the heat of the moment that you immediately wished you could take back? When it comes to parenting, our words carry tremendous weight. A single sentence can stick in a child's mind and heart for years, sometimes for a lifetime. We often talk about how actions affect children, but words can be just as powerful, sometimes even more so. A casual remark or a moment of frustration can leave a deep emotional scar. In this podcast, we're going to have an honest conversation about some of the most toxic things parents say to their children. Now, let's be clear. No parent is perfect. All parents have moments of stress, exhaustion, or anger when they say things they don't truly mean. Kids are incredibly good at pushing our buttons. Any parent listening knows that feeling. And many of us heard hurtful words when we were kids, only to realize as adults how much those words shaped us. So, this isn't about parent bashing or acting like we're above it all. It's about understanding the real impact certain words can have, so we can do better. If you grew up hearing these phrases, it might shed some light on why they affected you the way they did. We're focusing on 8 common toxic phrases or patterns parents sometimes use with their children. These are things that might come out during tough or emotional moments. They range from obvious insults to more subtle dismissals. We'll break down why each one is harmful from a psychological perspective, what message it sends to a child, how it can affect their self-esteem, their emotional development, even their relationships later in life. It's real insight into why these words hurt so much. As we go through each of the 8 toxic phrases, I invite you to reflect. Maybe you've heard some of these when you were young. Maybe, as a parent or caregiver, you've accidentally said one yourself when you were at your wit's end. Whatever the case, this is not about judging, but about learning and understanding. By recognizing these toxic phrases, we can catch ourselves before they slip out, or work on healing from them if we heard them growing up. So let's dive into the first one. Imagine a child getting ready for school, feeling pretty good about their new outfit, and a parent offhandedly says something like, "Are you really going out looking like that? You look so sloppy and fat." Or maybe it's more blunt. "You're getting chubby. You need to lose weight." Words like these about a child's appearance cut straight to the core. Children, especially when they're young, tend to accept what their parents say as the truth. So if a parent labels their appearance negatively, the child is likely to believe, "There's something wrong with me." In a world where kids are already bombarded with unrealistic beauty standards from media and peers, hearing such criticism from a parent, the one person who's supposed to love you no matter what, can be devastating. The psychological impact of appearance-related insults is well documented. Take body image, for example. Research in child development and adolescent psychology has consistently found that when parents criticize or shame a child's weight or looks, it significantly increases the risk of that child developing low self-esteem, anxiety about their body, or even eating disorders down the line. Imagine a teenage girl who constantly hears her mother say, "Are you really going to eat that? You're not exactly skinny, you know." She might start to feel intense shame every time she eats. Over time, that shame can spiral into unhealthy behaviors. Skipping meals, obsessively counting calories, or binge eating in secret. All because she's been made to feel that her natural body isn't acceptable. Boys are not immune either. A boy who's called scrawny or too short might become obsessed with his height or muscle mass, thinking he's not manly enough. Beyond specific disorders, there's the everyday erosion of self-worth. When a parent calls their child ugly, fat, or any other cruel remark about appearance, the child learns to see themselves through a harsh, critical lens. They may start avoiding looking in mirrors, or they might withdraw socially because they're afraid others will judge them the way their parent did. Some kids might swing the other way and become overly focused on appearance in an unhealthy manner. For instance, a child who's been told you need to lose weight might equate being thin with being loved. That can trigger a lifelong struggle with body image and self-esteem, even if their body was perfectly healthy to begin with. It's worth noting that in many cultures, there's a huge emphasis on looks and body shape. Sometimes parents think they're helping the child fit in or be better by pointing out flaws. In some families, a parent might say, "I'm only telling you this because I worry other kids will make fun of you," genuinely believing that a little tough love will protect their child from bullying. But the irony is that a parent's hurtful words often wound far more than any playground insult ever could, because parental words echo in a child's mind over and over. Unlike a school bully, a parent's voice can become the child's own inner voice. If that inner voice is calling them unattractive or not good enough, it's incredibly damaging. What should parents do instead? For one, remember that kids, especially preteens and teens, are already acutely aware of their appearance. They don't need a reminder of societal beauty standards. They're swimming in those every day. If a parent genuinely has concerns about a child's health, there are constructive ways to address it. Encourage fun physical activities together, provide nutritious meals, and emphasize being strong and healthy rather than hitting a certain weight or look. But it should never come in the form of insults or shaming. Above all, children need to hear from their parents that they are loved and valued no matter what they look like. Parents can make a point to compliment their kids on qualities that have nothing to do with looks, like their creativity, kindness, or effort. So the child knows their worth isn't skin deep. And if appearance does come up, a gentle, positive approach is key. Think about it this way. Many adults can vividly remember a single offhand comment their parent made about their looks decades ago. That's how much it sticks. So it's crucial to handle this topic with empathy and care. A parent's job is to help build their child's confidence, not tear it down. Let's move on to another kind of toxic remark: dismissing or mocking a child's feelings and behaviour. This often comes out as a parent saying something like, "Stop crying, you're being such a baby," or "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting so weird?" These phrases might not contain swear words or obvious insults, but they pack a punch in a different way. They tell a child that their feelings or the way they're behaving, which might just be part of their personality or a normal reaction, are not valid or are something to be ashamed of. Imagine a little boy who falls down and starts to cry because he scraped his knee. If his father immediately snaps, "You're fine, quit crying like a baby," the boy learns that expressing pain or fear is not acceptable. Or think about a shy girl who dances a little silly dance when she's happy, and her parent laughs and says sarcastically, "Why do you move like that? You look ridiculous." She's going to immediately feel self-conscious and embarrassed for something that was a genuine expression of joy moments before. The psychological term invalidation often comes up here. Emotional invalidation is when someone, often unintentionally, sends the message that your feelings are wrong or that there's something flawed about you for having them. In childhood, validation from parents is crucial. Kids are experiencing big emotions without yet having the tools to handle them, and they look to their parents to interpret those feelings. When a parent responds with, "It's not a big deal, get over it," or "Why are you so sensitive all the time?" the child might start to think, "Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I am just weird or too sensitive." They begin to doubt their own emotional experiences. Over time, this can lead to a few different outcomes, none of them good. The child might stop sharing their feelings and struggles with the parent because they expect to be mocked or brushed off. Or they might try to suppress their emotions entirely to avoid feeling wrong or annoying. Suppressing emotions is problematic because those feelings don't actually vanish. They just get bottled up. A child who is repeatedly told to stop crying or just toughen up may eventually stop shedding tears on the outside. But inside, they could be feeling confusion, loneliness, and even anger. Some children internalize the idea that showing any vulnerability is bad, so they put on a brave face at all times, which can be exhausting and unhealthy. Others might start expressing their distress in other ways, maybe through aggressive behavior or tantrums, because they haven't been guided in how to handle their emotions constructively. For instance, a boy who's learned that boys don't cry might never cry when he's hurt or sad, but he might lash out in anger later because that's the only outlet he feels is acceptable for a male to show emotion. Psychologists have linked consistent emotional invalidation in childhood to issues like anxiety, depression, and difficulty regulating emotions as kids grow up, precisely because those children were never taught how to cope in a healthy way. They were just taught to feel ashamed for feeling anything. Culturally, it's interesting to note that many of these phrases, "Stop crying," "Don't be a baby," "Man up," and the like, have been handed down through generations, especially in Western contexts where stoicism was often prized. You might recall the old-fashioned idea that children should be seen and not heard, or the general expectation that kids, especially boys, should be tough. In the past, a father might have believed he's preparing his son for a hard world by saying, "Toughen up, quit whining." And in some cultures, openly expressing feelings is still sometimes seen as a weakness. But modern psychology has made it clear that this approach can backfire badly. Children aren't miniature adults. They don't have the same emotional control or understanding that a grown-up might. And let's be honest, even adults struggle with emotions. So when they're upset or acting in a way we don't immediately understand, they actually need guidance and patience, not ridicule. So what's a better approach when a child is crying or acting out in a way that tempts a parent to roll their eyes? Instead of snapping, "You're overreacting," a parent can first acknowledge the feeling. "I see you're really upset," or "I know that was scary, wasn't it?" This doesn't mean the parent is giving in or that they won't address any misbehavior. It simply means they're showing the child that feelings in themselves are not bad. After validating the emotion, the parent can then gently guide the child to calm down or solve the problem. Take a deep breath. "It's okay to be sad. I'm here with you." Or, "Let's figure out what we can do about it together." If a child is doing something odd or silly that isn't harmful, maybe just let them be. Kids are quirky. If it's something inappropriate, correct the behavior without insulting them personally. For example, instead of, "What's wrong with you? Why are you acting so weird?" a parent could say, "Hey, that's not how we behave because reason. Let's try doing this instead." The idea is to guide, not shame. When children grow up with their emotions respected rather than dismissed, they learn an invaluable lesson. It's okay to feel what they feel. They become more confident in understanding themselves. They also tend to have better emotional regulation because they've been taught how to work through feelings, not ignore them. On the flip side, a child who only ever heard "get over it" might become an adult who doesn't know how to deal with grief or who feels uncomfortable when their own children cry, perpetuating the cycle. Or they might carry a lasting sense that something is wrong with them whenever they feel down or anxious, because that's the message they internalized. So, these casual dismissals and mockeries are far from harmless. They strike at a child's developing sense of self and emotional security. In short, telling a child to stop feeling what they're feeling, or making fun of them for it, is toxic because it denies the child the basic validation and empathy that everyone, especially a young person, needs. Children deserve to feel that their inner world matters, and when parents offer that understanding instead of scorn, it can make an enormous difference in the child's emotional well-being and trust in the parent. Now, let's talk about perhaps the most heartbreaking phrase of all. When a parent tells a child, "I wish you had never been born," or "having you was a mistake." It's hard to imagine any words more crushing for a child to hear. In that moment, the child is being told that their very existence is a regret, that the world, or at least their family, would be better off without them. Even if said in a moment of extreme anger or frustration, those words cannot be unheard by the child. They strike at the very core of a child's need for love and belonging. Every child, no matter how difficult a situation might be, fundamentally wants to believe that their parents are glad they exist. When that belief is shattered by a parent's outburst, the psychological fallout can be severe. Children are not equipped to brush off a statement like, "You shouldn't have been born," as just an angry quip. Instead, they internalize it deeply. "Mom or dad doesn't want me here. I'm not supposed to be alive." That can lead to intense feelings of worthlessness and despair. In the short term, a child might respond with inconsolable crying, or conversely, a stunned silence, as if they've just had the wind knocked out of them. They might even say something like, "I'm sorry I was born," or "I'll be better, I promise," desperately scrambling to undo the impossible. In the long run, these kinds of statements are a form of trauma. Yes, emotional trauma, even if no physical harm was done. A child who grows up hearing from a parent that they're a regrettable mistake may struggle with chronic depression, suicidal thoughts, or a profound sense of emptiness. After all, if the people who brought you into the world express regret about it, it's easy for a child to wonder, "What's the point of me being here at all?" From a psychological theory standpoint, this touches on what's often called unconditional love or unconditional positive regard. The idea, championed by psychologists like Carl Rogers, is that children thrive when they know they are loved without conditions, simply for being themselves. Now, telling a child you regret their very birth is the polar opposite of unconditional love. It's saying your love is so conditional that it might not exist at all. Children who receive unconditional support tend to develop a stable sense of self-worth. In contrast, children who are told, directly or indirectly, that their worthiness is in question often develop what Rogers would call conditions of worth, meaning they feel they have to earn love or that they don't inherently deserve it. In extreme cases like this, the condition is impossible to meet, because how can a child prove they should have been born, leaving them feeling inherently unlovable? It's also worth noting that kids often blame themselves for parental conflicts or unhappiness. If a parent is venting something so extreme, a child may think, "This is my fault. If only I were different, they would want me." They might carry that guilt and try to change themselves desperately, perhaps becoming overly obedient, caretaking their parents, or suppressing their own needs, in hopes of winning back their parents' approval of their existence. It's a tragic burden for a young mind to carry, and it can shape their personality in unhealthy ways. Some kids become perfectionists, thinking they must be perfect to justify their existence. Others might turn their hurt outward, developing behavioral problems or anger as a mask over the pain of feeling unwanted. And some fall into deep sadness or withdrawal, convinced they're a burden to everyone around them. Let's be real. For a parent to say something this extreme, often that parent is in a very bad place emotionally themselves. It might come from severe stress, mental health issues, or a dysfunctional family dynamic where such language has become normalized. However, understanding why a parent might say it does not undo the damage for the child. If this ever slips out, it's not enough to simply say, "I didn't mean it." That parent would need to take major steps to reassure the child it isn't true. And even then, the scar may remain. Ideally, of course, this should never be said in the first place. What's the alternative? It's simple. Even in the worst moments of frustration, avoid attacking the child's existence or personhood. A parent can communicate that they're upset or overwhelmed without implying they regret the child's birth. For instance, saying, "I'm very upset right now," or "This is a really hard time for me," is expressing the parent's feelings without blaming the child for being alive. If a parent ever feels the words, "I wish you weren't born," on the tip of their tongue, that's a sign they need to step away, calm down, and perhaps seek help. Because those words cross a line that can permanently damage a child's sense of self. Sometimes parents, in their brokenness, say things that are horribly wrong. It doesn't mean those things are true. Healing from such a wound might require time, self-compassion, possibly therapy, and a lot of reassurance. But it's important to realize that the flaw was in the parenting at that moment, not in you. Every child born has inherent value. A parent failing to see that is a reflection of their issues, not the child's. In summary, telling a child their existence is regretted is one of the most toxic, damaging things imaginable. It undermines the fundamental security that every child should have. The knowledge that their parents are in their corner, glad that they're alive. Without that security, a child is left emotionally adrift. So if there's one phrase to absolutely banish from any parent's lips, it's this one. Another toxic line, sometimes said in moments of parental burnout or frustration, is anything that makes the child feel like a burden or a problem. This includes phrases like, "You cost me too much money," "It's so hard to take care of you," or "Having you exhausts me." Essentially, the parent is saying, "You are a problem for me. You're too much." Now, every parent gets tired and overwhelmed at times. Raising kids is hard work and expensive. We all know that. When a parent tells a child, directly or by implication, that the child is a heavy burden, the child's immediate reaction is often guilt and shame. They think, "I'm hurting mom or dad. I'm the reason they're unhappy, or tired, or broke." The emotional consequences of this are significant. A child who feels like a burden will try very hard to be low maintenance. They might start holding back on expressing their needs, desires, or problems in an attempt not to upset their parents further. For example, a kid who knows money is tight and has been told, "You cost us so much," might stop asking for things, even things they truly need, like new shoes when the old ones are falling apart, because they'd rather suffer in silence than be reminded that they're a financial strain. Or a child might hide the fact that they're being bullied at school or that they feel sad because they've picked up the message that their problems only add to their parents' load. The tragedy here is that such a child can become extremely lonely and anxious, essentially parenting themselves emotionally, because they don't want to be one more problem for their parents. In some cases, children internalize the "I'm a burden" belief so deeply that it follows them into adulthood. They may struggle with feelings of unworthiness, thinking they're a bother to everyone around them, friends, partners, even their own future children. You might see this in an adult who apologizes for everything, constantly afraid of imposing on others, or someone who becomes a people pleaser, always putting others' needs first because they don't feel entitled to have their needs met. There's often a sense of shame at their core, a belief that I'm fundamentally troublesome or defective. This kind of toxic shame can contribute to mental health issues like depression and social anxiety. After all, if you feel you're a burden, it's hard to truly connect with people. You're always holding back, expecting rejection, or feeling you have to earn every scrap of affection by not being too much. We should also consider that sometimes parents say these things not out of malice, but out of sheer exhaustion or lack of support. Imagine a single mother working two jobs, coming home to an energetic child. In a moment of exhaustion, she might sigh, "You're wearing mommy out. I can't handle you right now." She likely doesn't mean to make the child feel unwanted. In her mind, she's stating her own fatigue. But a young child doesn't have the context to think, "Mom's just really tired today." They hear, "I can't handle you," and translate that to, "I'm too much to handle," believing they are the problem. So, intent aside, the impact remains harmful if it becomes a pattern. What's the healthier alternative? Parents can and should express their feelings and set boundaries, but it needs to be clear that it's the situation that's hard, not the child's existence. Instead of, "You cost me too much money," a parent could say, "We have to budget our money carefully right now." That communicates a financial reality without blaming the child for it. Instead of, "You're exhausting," one might say, "I've had a long day and I'm really tired. Let's sit down quietly for a bit." That way, the parent acknowledges their own limit, tiredness, without framing the child as the cause of that limit. And if a parent does slip up and say something hurtful about the child being too much, it's important to follow up when calm, with reassurance. "Hey, I'm sorry I said that. You are not a problem. I was just very frustrated. But I love you, and I'm glad you're here." Kids need to hear explicitly that they are not a burden, that they are loved and welcome in the family, even if things are tough. The goal is to let children feel secure in the knowledge that, yes, parenting is sometimes stressful, but the child is never the source of the parent's life problems. Children should feel like they are a source of joy, or at least that their presence is valued, not an affliction their parent has to bear. When kids feel valued, they are more likely to come to their parents with problems and trust that they won't be pushed away. On the other hand, when kids feel like a burden, they may isolate themselves or even act out. Sometimes a child who feels neglected or like they're in the way might misbehave as a misguided way to get attention or test if the parent actually cares. In the long run, ensuring a child knows they're wanted can shape a healthier, more confident adult. So wiping out those "you're a burden" comments and replacing them with messages that "you might tire me out sometimes, but I still love having you in my life" is key. The next toxic habit is comparing a child to someone else, often a sibling, but it could be a cousin, a classmate, or even the parent themselves at that age. You've probably heard lines like, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Or, "Your sister got all A's, what's wrong with you?" Or perhaps, "When I was your age, I was already doing X. Why can't you?" On the surface, a parent might say these things thinking they're motivating the child to improve. They might believe a comparison will spark some healthy competition or push the child to try harder. But in reality, these comparisons almost always backfire and leave deep emotional wounds. When a child is compared unfavorably to someone else, the message they hear is, "No matter what you do, it's not good enough. Someone else is better." This is a direct hit to their self-esteem. Instead of feeling motivated, the child often feels defeated or resentful. Imagine studying hard for a math test and bringing home a B, feeling proud because last time you got a C. But instead of acknowledging the improvement, your parent says, "Well, your cousin got an A plus on that test. Why didn't you?" That response would be deflating. The child in that scenario might think, "Why do I even bother trying if it's never going to be enough?" Over time, repeated comparisons can make a child give up on striving at all because they internalize a belief that they're inherently second rate. Alternatively, some kids react by becoming fiercely competitive in an unhealthy way, not because they genuinely enjoy the activity or want personal growth, but because they're desperate to earn a parent's approval and feel valued. Neither outcome is good for the child's mental health or intrinsic motivation. Comparisons also strain family relationships, especially among siblings. If a parent is constantly holding one child up as the golden standard that the other should live up to, it breeds resentment. The child who is compared negatively may start to dislike or envy the sibling who seemingly can do no wrong in the parent's eyes. They might think, Mum and Dad love my brother more than me, even if that's not true. Meanwhile, the sibling being idealized might feel pressured to maintain that image, or could even feel guilty seeing their brother or sister being put down in contrast to them. It's a lose-lose situation for the sibling relationship. Instead of growing up as supportive friends, the kids are pitted against each other in a rivalry for parental approval. Years later, that can translate into distant or tense relationships between siblings who never felt accepted as individuals in their own family. And in some cases, the less favored child might carry bitterness well into adulthood, either towards the sibling or the parent or both. It's important to remember that every child is unique, with their own strengths, weaknesses, and pace of development. One might be a math whiz, another might be an artist, another a great athlete. Comparing one to the other is like telling a fish to climb a tree because the monkey can do it. It just doesn't make sense, and it only makes the fish feel inadequate. A child who's constantly compared might start to lose sight of their own gifts because they're always being told that the other person's qualities are what matter. This can hamper the child's ability to develop a healthy self-identity. Instead of learning to value what they bring to the table, they grow up fixated on what they lack compared to someone else. So what should parents do instead of comparing? First, recognize the difference between inspiration and comparison. It's one thing to say, your friend John practices piano every day, that's why he's really good. Maybe if you practiced a bit more, you'd improve too. Do you want to try that? Versus, John is better than you at piano, why aren't you like him? The former invites the child to learn from someone's example without devaluing them. The latter just delivers a blow to their ego. If a sibling or peer has achieved something, you can talk about it in a way that doesn't make it a direct measure of the child's worth. For instance, your sister found a study routine that works well for her grades. Let's figure out a routine that works for you, rather than, you see, your sister can get A's. Why can't you be that disciplined? It's also key to deliberately affirm each child's individual strengths. I love how creative you are. You have such a kind heart. You did great in your own way. This helps the child understand that they are valued for who they are, not just in comparison to someone else. Another angle, if a parent finds themselves frequently wanting to compare their child to another, it might reflect the parent's own anxieties or competitive feelings. Maybe the parent is worried their child will fall behind, or they feel pressure to have high-achieving kids. It can help for the parent to remember that childhood is not a race or a competition. Every child will hit milestones at their own pace. Encouragement works far better than comparison. Psychologically, kids who feel supported and accepted are more likely to put in effort and improve in the areas that they can improve. Kids who feel constantly compared and found wanting are more likely to either rebel or lose motivation. In the end, the goal is to help each child become the best version of themselves, not a copy of someone else. A parent's words can either make a child feel uniquely valuable or make them feel like they'll never measure up. By avoiding those, "Why aren't you like so-and-so" comments, parents can foster a healthier self-esteem in their children and a more harmonious bond among siblings and peers. Yet another destructive message is the classic name-calling and labeling. Telling a child they are stupid, worthless, bad, or that they'll never succeed. This might come out as, "You're so dumb," "You're lazy and won't get anywhere in life," "You're a loser," or "You never do anything right." Sometimes it's not even a full sentence, just an exasperated parent muttering, "Ugh, you're hopeless." These are clearly harsh words. They sound like outright insults because they are. Sadly, in the heat of anger or frustration, some parents do resort to this kind of language. Maybe a child keeps messing up a task and the parent snaps, "Can't you do anything right?" Or a parent sees a poor report card and says, "You'll never amount to anything if you're this lazy." The parent might justify it internally as trying to wake the kid up or give a tough lesson. But what it actually does is tear the child down. When a child is repeatedly told that they are stupid, useless, or a failure, they begin to form that exact belief about themselves. Children don't have the perspective to say, "Whoa, Mom's just saying that because she's mad. It's not really true." Instead, they absorb it. If Mom or Dad says I'm stupid, I must be stupid. That can turn into an enduring part of their self-concept, their inner voice echoing, "I'm not good enough," whenever they face a challenge. Psychologically, this is a recipe for low self-esteem and self-doubt. A child who believes they are stupid might stop putting effort into school because they think, "What's the point? I'll fail anyway." This is sometimes called a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you're told you're going to fail, you might unconsciously act in ways that make failure more likely, confirming the negative label. Similarly, being called lazy constantly might demotivate a child. They figure, if I'm lazy, why bother trying to be otherwise? That's just who I am, I guess. It's pretty heartbreaking because the child essentially gives up on themselves due to the parents' words. On the flip side, some children respond to these labels with rebellion or anger. If a teenager is always branded the bad kid or troublemaker of the family, they might lean into it out of spite or despair, thinking, "Fine, if you already think I'm a bad person, why should I try to be good?" Either way, whether the child becomes defeated or defiant, the root problem is the same. The parents' words have defined the child in a negative way, rather than addressing a specific behavior or issue that the child could change. There's an important distinction in parenting, and really in all relationships, between saying what you did was not okay and you as a person are not okay. Toxic labels collapse that distinction. They attack the child's character rather than focusing on actions. It's worth noting that even one-time outbursts of "you're so stupid" can stick in a child's mind. But when it's habitual, it verges into emotional abuse territory. Some families unfortunately have a culture of insults. A parent might say, "Well, my dad called me names when I was growing up and I turned out fine." But did they really turn out fine? Or did they just get used to a certain level of verbal aggression? Research in child psychology overwhelmingly shows that children who experience frequent verbal abuse, including name-calling and belittling, have higher rates of anxiety, depression, and behavior problems. Words matter. The scars from insults might not be visible like a bruise, but they can last a lifetime. A child who grows up feeling "I'm worthless" because a parent said so might struggle in relationships, in careers, in any area where self-confidence is key. They might also be more likely to tolerate abuse from others later on, because deep down they feel they deserve it or that it's normal to be spoken to that way. That's a scary legacy for just a few angry words uttered over the years. So, what's the alternative? It's crucial for parents to separate the child's actions from the child's worth. If a child truly does something wrong or isn't meeting expectations, the parent can certainly address it, but focus on the deed, not an unchangeable trait. Instead of "you're so lazy," a parent could say, "I notice you haven't been doing your chores lately. What's going on? How can we make sure those get done?" That opens up a conversation and places attention on a behavior that can change, rather than stamping the child with a label. Instead of "you're stupid," one might say, "I see you're struggling with this. Let's figure it out together." Or even if discipline is needed, "You made a bad choice there." Targeting the choice, not the child's entire being. And very importantly, if a parent does slip and hurl an insult, it's on them to make amends. Apologize for the harsh words and affirm to the child, "You are not stupid. I was wrong to say that. I was upset, but I know you're capable." Children do forgive, especially when they see a parent takes responsibility for a mistake. Building a child up works so much better than tearing them down. If a child grows up hearing, "I believe in you, you can do better," rather than "you'll never make it," they're far more likely to actually do better. Encouragement creates hope and motivation. Insults create hurt and hopelessness. This doesn't mean parents should sugarcoat everything. Constructive criticism and discipline are part of raising a child. But even corrections can be delivered with respect and belief in the child's potential. That way, the child understands, "I did something not great, but I am not a bad or incapable person. I can improve." And that mindset is what helps kids become resilient, confident adults. Removing the toxic labels from our language with children clears the path for them to build a healthy self-image. One of the cruelest forms of manipulation a parent can use is threatening to abandon the child. Phrases like, "If you don't stop, I'm just going to leave you here," or "Keep it up and I'll go away and never come back," fall into this category. Some parents might even threaten to give the child away. "I'll send you to an orphanage," or "Maybe I should just put you on a plane to your grandparents since you don't listen to me." These words instill sheer terror in a child. Young children, especially, depend entirely on their parents for survival and security. The idea that mom or dad would disappear and leave them alone is the most frightening thing they can imagine. Even older kids and teenagers, who are more independent, have an emotional reliance on their parents' presence and support. When a parent weaponizes that dependence by saying they'll abandon the child, it can create deep anxiety and insecurity. From a psychological perspective, this is directly tied to attachment. Developmental psychologists like John Bowlby, who pioneered attachment theory, have shown that a child's sense of safety and ability to form secure relationships is built on the foundation of knowing their caregiver is reliably there for them. When a parent threatens to withdraw that love or physical presence, it shakes the foundation. The child may become clingy and fearful, constantly seeking reassurance that the parent isn't going to leave for real. Or the child might develop an anxious attachment style where they grow up feeling a persistent worry that people they love will eventually leave them. Imagine a little kid whose mom says at the grocery store, "Fine, you stay here then, I'm leaving," as a tactic to get the kid to follow. The child might scramble after her crying, and sure, the immediate behavior, running off, stops, but at the cost of the child's sense of security. They learned, "Mum might leave me if I don't do what she wants." That's a frightening lesson to absorb, and it doesn't just vanish once the grocery trip is over. Over time, a child who has been subjected to abandonment threats might exhibit various troubling behaviors. They might have nightmares or separation anxiety, panicking whenever a parent is out of sight or late to pick them up, because the fear of what if they really left is always lurking. Some kids might become overly compliant and eager to please, trying never to upset their parents because they fear being abandoned as punishment. Others might develop trust issues that carry into adulthood. For example, that child could grow into an adult who finds it hard to trust that a romantic partner or friend won't suddenly leave them. They might become jealous or possessive in relationships, or on the flip side, they might avoid getting too close to people to protect themselves from potential abandonment. All of this stems from that deep-seated insecurity planted by the parent's words. It's also worth mentioning that threatening abandonment is often a sign of a parent's desperation or loss of control. Perhaps they've tried other discipline methods and nothing's working in the moment, so in exasperation they blurt out, "I'm going to leave without you." Or maybe it was a tactic they themselves heard from their own parents and assumed it's an acceptable way to handle misbehavior. In some cultures or older generations, you'd hear things like, "If you're naughty, the boogeyman will come take you away," which is a variation on the theme of scaring the child into compliance by invoking loss of the caregiver or being taken. But while it might stop the behavior right then and there, because the child is scared stiff, it doesn't teach the child why they should behave or help them develop internal discipline. All it teaches is fear, fear of abandonment, which doesn't go away and can pop up in unhealthy ways later. So what should a parent do instead? By all means, set boundaries and consequences for misbehavior, but never make love or presence conditional. For instance, if a child is refusing to leave a playground, instead of, "Okay, I'm leaving you here then," a parent can say, "We need to go now. If you can't come willingly, I will have to carry you to the car because it's time to leave." That way, the parent is still asserting authority and following through, even physically removing the child if necessary, but not by threatening to sever the relationship. Or if a child is misbehaving intensely, a parent might say, "I need a break for a moment, but I'll be right in the other room and I'll come back as soon as I'm calm," rather than, "I'm going to walk out on you." It's crucial to reassure children, especially after any conflict, that "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, even if I was upset." Kids might even test this. Sometimes, pushing boundaries to see if the parent's love and presence are truly unwavering. It's the parent's job to show them, "Yes, I might get angry or frustrated, but I will never abandon you." For children who have heard these threats and are now anxious, parents should work to rebuild that sense of security. This can be done by consistently keeping promises, by saying things like, "I will always come back for you," and then demonstrating it every day in small ways. For example, if you say you'll be back at 5 to pick them up, be there at 5. The more the child sees that the parent is reliable and not going to vanish, the more those fears can heal. And if a parent has slipped up and made an abandonment threat, it's important to clarify to the child, "I said something in anger that I didn't mean. I will never actually leave you behind. I'm sorry I scared you." That kind of conversation can go a long way to repair the damage. In some, threatening a child with abandonment is playing with one of their deepest fears. It's a line that simply shouldn't be crossed. Children flourish when they feel secure. They become confident and independent precisely because they trust that their parents are a safe home base. Take away that assurance, even just with words, and you undercut the child's confidence in your relationship and in themselves. Far better to discipline with love, clearly still on the table, so the child learns right from wrong without having to question the stability of their family. The last toxic pattern we'll cover is when parents make empty promises or consistently break their word to their children. It might sound less obviously hurtful than an insult or a threat, but it can be very damaging over time. Think of phrases like, "If you get an A in that class, I'll buy you that new game." And then, when the A comes, the promise isn't kept. Or simple assurances like, "I'll be at your school play, I promise." But then the parent doesn't show up. Even something as everyday as, "I'll play with you later, I just have to finish this." And later never comes. When these kinds of promises are broken again and again, children learn a painful lesson. They can't trust what their parent says. Trust is a fundamental component of the parent-child relationship. When a child is young, their parents are basically their whole world, and the child naturally trusts them to be truthful and follow through. Each time a parent breaks a promise, a bit of that trust erodes. The child might feel betrayed or unimportant. For example, imagine a dad who promises every week, "This weekend we'll go to the park." And each weekend something comes up and it doesn't happen. The child may act out, whining or crying about the broken promise, or they might quietly internalize the disappointment. They might start to feel like, "Dad cares more about other things than spending time with me." It can also lead to embarrassment or social issues. Consider a kid who excitedly tells their friends, "My mom is taking me to the zoo on Saturday," only to have Monday roll around and the trip didn't happen. The child feels let down and maybe even ashamed that they believed it. Over time, a pattern of empty promises can teach a child not to expect much from people, or conversely, to crave reliability intensely and feel very upset at any sign of inconsistency. Some children become jaded and stop believing promises altogether, a kind of protective mechanism so they won't get hurt when let down. You might hear a child say, "Yeah, sure, whatever," when a parent promises something, with an eye roll because they've learned not to buy into it. That cynicism can carry into teenage years and adulthood. They might have trouble trusting others' words, always expecting that promises will be broken, because that was their early experience. Imagine how that might affect their friendships or romantic relationships. They could struggle to fully believe someone will stick to what they said, always bracing for disappointment. There's also the example parents set. If a mom or dad routinely breaks promises, the child might learn that keeping your word isn't important. They might start to mimic that behavior, telling lies or not following through on commitments themselves. After all, children often do as we do, not just as we say. So, a parent who wants their child to grow up honest and reliable needs to model those qualities in how they treat the child, as well as others. Now, life happens, and no parent can keep 100% of promises. Emergencies arise, schedules change. We sometimes say, "maybe later," without realizing our child took it as a definite promise. But the key is how often and how we handle it. An occasional miss, followed by a sincere apology and effort to make it right, will be understood. What we're talking about as toxic is the habitual, casual breaking of promises. Making promises lightly just to appease the child in the moment or to manipulate the child's behavior, with no real intention or effort to follow through. So how can parents avoid this trap? Firstly, be mindful about what you promise. If you're not sure you can deliver, it's better to be honest and say, "I'll try to do this, but I can't guarantee," or "don't promise at all." Just say, "let's see what we can do," or set a more realistic expectation. If you do promise something, whether it's a small thing like playing a game later or a bigger thing like a weekend outing, make it a priority to follow through. If circumstances genuinely prevent you from keeping a promise, say an unexpected work emergency or illness, talk to your child about it. Offer a heartfelt apology and an alternate plan. "I know I promised we'd go to the park today. I'm really sorry I have to work. How about we go first thing next Saturday instead? And maybe we'll bring a picnic." Then, crucially, keep that rescheduled plan. This shows the child that you take your promises seriously and respect their feelings. Also, acknowledge the child's disappointment. It's okay to say, I know you're upset that I couldn't make it to your game. I would be upset too. I'm sorry. By doing this, you validate that their feelings are justified and show that you care. It's much better than brushing it off with, oh, you'll get over it, which can compound the hurt with a dose of dismissal, tying back to our discussion on emotional invalidation. When children see that, by and large, their parents do what they say they will do, it builds a sense of security and mutual respect. They learn that they can count on their caregivers, which also makes them more likely to respect rules and listen to guidance, because there's a foundation of trust. Conversely, when kids feel they can't trust a word that comes out of a parent's mouth, it can become every person for themselves. The child might start to think, why should I keep to the rules or tell the truth if my parent doesn't keep their word to me? It erodes the parent's authority in the child's eyes as well. In short, consistently keeping promises or being honest and accountable when you can't shows your child that you value them and that you are reliable. It helps them develop into trustworthy individuals as well. Cutting out the empty promises is about demonstrating integrity and building that strong bond of trust. Children remember when we come through for them, and those are the moments that reinforce that precious sense of security and love. We've journeyed through 8 toxic things parents sometimes say, and if there's one thread that connects them all, it's this: words have power, especially the words from a parent to a child. They can uplift and shape a child's confidence and security, or they can cut deep and leave lasting scars. Many of these toxic phrases come out in moments of anger, exhaustion, or desperation. Parents are human, and they err. But as we've discussed, the impact on the child can endure far beyond that moment. A careless remark can echo in a child's mind for years, influencing how they feel about themselves and how they relate to others. The good news is that awareness is a big part of the solution. By recognizing these harmful phrases, parents and caregivers can catch themselves before the words slip out, or at least address them and apologize if they do. Parenting doesn't require perfection. What it needs is genuine effort to communicate love and understanding. It's about choosing to pause and rephrase, or to repair when you've wronged. Over time, those positive efforts accumulate. Children are remarkably resilient when they know they are loved. An occasional mistake, surrounded by lots of affection and reassurance, will not ruin a child. What hurts is when toxic communication becomes the norm. For anyone listening who realizes, oh no, I've said some of these things, don't despair. It's never too late to change the way you speak to your kids. Apologies go a long way, and so does simply improving going forward. You might even sit down with your child and talk about some of these issues. It can be healing to acknowledge, I know I've said hurtful things like X before, and I'm sorry. I'm working on being kinder because you matter to me. Such honesty and vulnerability can actually strengthen the parent-child bond. It teaches kids that everyone can learn and grow, even parents. Respect, empathy, and patience in communication build kids up. Contempt, shame, and harshness tear them down. If we want the next generation to be emotionally healthy and confident, we must strive to give them a foundation of love and understanding. It doesn't mean never disciplining or setting limits. It means doing so in a way that preserves the child's dignity and sense of security. After all, one day those children will grow up and remember how they were spoken to. Let's aim for them to remember words that made them feel safe, loved, and capable, rather than words that hurt. It's a tough topic, but an important one. By shining a light on it, we take the first step towards breaking cycles of hurt and creating healthier communication in families. Remember, it's never too late to speak with kindness and to heal, both ourselves and our relationships with the little and not so little ones we care